I guess he's just a regular guy. He's a family man. He's a structural engineer, works on skyscrapers, has a beautiful little kid. And as we start this movie, we see him in kind of an uncomfortable situation where he's stressed. He's been out of the family house. He's moving back home, trying to make it work with his wife, trying to be there for his kid who doesn't quite understand the dynamics between his mother and his father, and a kid who's also suffering from diabetes. He's not very well and very sensitive child as well. And so you kind of house John Garrity in this almost like a family drama at first, but with this almost movie monster building in the background. And by the time that comes into play, this comet Clark, which has taken everybody by surprise, you're already now very much involved with John Garrity as a father, as a working man, and as somebody trying to bring his family back together, but not quite understanding the few additional challenges that are going to present themselves and what it really means to bring your family together. This movie grabbed me right from the start. I always love these larger ideas where there is some kind of crisis going on, either with a community, a country, or humanity. But what I really loved about this, and knowing the director that I was going to work with, but also knowing that the script that I was reading, was that it felt like an inside job. It came from the inside out. That it's more you're involved with this family, you're involved with these people, it's like with this intimate level of knowledge of character portraits. But then, rather than the typical kind of action movie where you're focusing on the bigger thing, the comet, that's almost in the background and only builds as the movie goes on. But this is really, I felt like the themes in the movie, that it was incredibly emotional and fraught. And it's just this family going through hell, but them as a snapshot of what all of humanity are going through, in terms of just the gauntlet being thrown down from moment to moment, and the challenges getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what will they do within that? What will a family do to stay together? What will a father do to protect his family? And that's also what I liked, is it wasn't your typical hero who's going up there to like punch the comet in the face. He's, this is just a simple man and a family. Almost the hero here is almost the family unit themselves. The mother's a hero, the son is a hero. And sometimes heroism is literally just fighting enough to survive. So I really enjoyed the subtleties in it. It took me by surprise, the freshness. The reality as well is, again, not all about the spectacle and the action, but also about the truth, as we're seeing now in days of this pandemic. Is sometimes it's just the messiness, it's the not knowing, it's the disinformation, it's the how do you even make it to the airport? There's traffic. How do you say goodbye to your neighbors who 2 minutes ago were your best friends and everything was hunky-dory, and in that short space of time you realize, oh my God, life is about to change for everybody, and I'll never see you again, and I gotta now basically drive away and leave you to die. There's so many kind of moral challenges and reflections in the movie, as well as all the bells and whistles, all the action and the spectacle, which I feel is even more powerful and more truthful and authentic, because we are taking it. We start on the micro, on the family, on the human, on the people. And therefore you're drawn into this very grounded, organic relationship that could be any family on the planet going through any of the multiple stresses that families and relationships go through. That makes the rest of the movie and all that spectacle so much more powerful and real, because there's very much a truth to it. So I felt like it could definitely take an audience by surprise and take them on a journey and inspire them and scare the beheebie-Jesus out of them, and also make them sit and think about where we are in the world today. Where are we as humans? And as we're being asked this question, as you know, with everything that's going on in our planet. Again, one of the things I really loved about this movie was how, you know, often you do scenes and you enjoy doing them and they can be powerful, but you still know that they're ridiculous, and they're just part of the story that you're trying to tell. Whereas these scenes felt so truthful and so devastating. And that was definitely a scene that struck a chord with me, when you go from essentially watching the Super Bowl, watching parts of a comet hitting the Earth and thinking, this is fun, this is going to be cool, to realizing, oh my God, something so much more dangerous and devastating is afoot. And the people that you were looking at, who you were probably going to golf with the next day, you're never going to see again. And you're having to leave your kids' best friends in the driveway. And the performances in that scene were also so profound and devastating. So when one of our friends comes out with their child, begging us to take her child to the Air Force Base to give her a chance, but of course we can't. But that was played so powerfully that every time I had to drive away, it was goosebumps and tears welling, and the whole neighborhood could hear it and see it. And again, it's when this is written so beautifully and then directed and performed so well, it just it leaves a truth and a power behind it, because you could just so see that happening. And that's this movie the whole way through. What I really love is that at first you have no idea why he's selected. And neither do the neighbors. You know, he's receiving these presidential alerts that are saying, report to this naval base, or report to this, Air Force Base with your family. And it's very specific, and it seems very authentic, but at the same time, it makes no sense whatsoever, and nobody else is getting these messages. And why is it him? But yeah, as it transpires, he has certain skills. They're nothing spectacular, you know. This is not Mike Banning and the Has Fallen. He's not trained to protect anybody, but he's an engineer, and the government are already looking to a world that's going to look very different, and nobody knows how many people are going to make it through this comet strike. There is no escaping it. But so therefore, who is going to be involved in the New World Order? And that would be obviously people like doctors and nurses, engineers, people who can rebuild, people who can create, people who have certain skills that would be useful to a society basically starting again in a very different part of the world, which is, of course, is Greenland. And I feel like that comes with a certain amount of relief, because he now has a chance. They have a fighting chance to make it, but even then, there's still it's by no means easy, and even they don't realize what those challenges are going to entail just to get to that Air Force Base, just to get in. But I think it also leaves them with a sense of survivor's guilt. Why us? Why were we chosen? You know, it could have been any of. I know he's not the only structural engineer on the planet. You know, why are they choosing him and not any of the others? Or why would this nurse be chosen, or this doctor? Or so. It's a very interesting time. We're all facing the same challenge. Humanity, suddenly we recognize each other. And we see that whether you're in China, whether you're in the US, or whether you're in Europe, we're all facing the same problems, as is the case with the Comet Clark. It is the great equalizer. But within realizing that at that point, the fragility of humanity and how we are all just the same, there is also this elitist thing still going on, as we've seen today. Some people could get tests easier. Some people have access to better treatment. And in this case, in our movie, some people are being chosen and some people aren't. And of course, the ones with money are going to have more of a chance to maybe escape this. Probably not, but more of a chance. So I liked both those different aspects, you know. But again, it leads into what I felt was the authenticity of the movie and the complexity of what it means to both the family and in the more macro to humanity as a whole, as they face their ultimate demise, and the various ways that plays out. Whether it's this, again, a thing that I loved in the movie is all the different reactions to that, whether people are protesting or celebrating or looting. It's like you're defined by the challenge in front of you, and this challenge is really in people's last moments. How are they going to be defined? And who does play a hero? Who is a coward? Who doesn't care? Who doesn't believe? Or who sacrifices themselves for others? Who fights for their own, for their family? It's the kind of the messiness and the all-inclusiveness of all these different, which we are seeing today again, and the different reactions to what's going on in our world. I think on the one hand, John feels like he has a lot to make up for his family. He's living with an exceptional amount of guilt, which we discover as the movie goes on exactly what is happening. But there's obviously been a breakdown in his relationship with his wife. He feels very badly for his kid, who he can see is hurting from what's been going on between them. So he now feels this additional responsibility to make sure that his family is safe. But even more than that, what I like is just the regular normality in some ways of this man who could be any man. He's every man. He's just a father who will do anything to protect his wife and his kid. And that's something that I think is, again, why I know from my experience and friends and other people that have seen it, why they find it so powerful is in some ways the lack of heroism in these heroes. They're everyday heroes. It's not one man standing against a country or one, to be honest, the kind of roles I often play myself, this is not that guy. He has no special skills. He just has a lot of love and passion and courage, which I think would be brought out in almost anybody in these circumstances. But you also see it coming from John's wife, Allison, and even from the kid. Even the kid has his moments where he has to stand up and be incredibly courageous to help keep his family together, and again, that's what I loved was that in the family, and then also seeing that as we brush past people, as we come into contact with other people who are heroes who help us, who are villains who try to stop us in our way. And it's again another theme that I really liked in the movie was this idea of there's a little bit of good in even the worst of us, and a little bit of bad in even the best of us. And I think that that's really what this movie paints so beautifully as we go on this road trip to try and survive, is people doing good actions, bad people doing the right actions in moments, and then good people doing terrible things, but maybe for the right reasons. And so you as an audience, you're so involved and you're being dragged into this, but at the same time, you're like, it's so hard to kind of accuse or point the finger, because you go, would I do the same thing? I'm only trying to save my wife. So it's fascinating in that respect. I think what I love is the movie becomes, one, it's highly entertaining and exciting, but then it really becomes a conversation afterwards as to, again, who we are and who would we be in this situation. There is an element of redemption in John Garrity's story. And part of that, I think, is conscious. He's very aware at the start of all this going on, where he's at with his wife and what he's feeling, the guilt of past actions. But then a lot of the redemption also is, his redemption comes also from a place that's not conscious. He's not trying to redeem himself. She just sees in her husband the good aspects that come out at a time like this, when humanity itself is in this incredible crisis, as are they, and she sees what her husband does and knows what he's gone through. And of course he knows, he has to pay the ultimate sacrifice in a way, to try and get back to his family, and he goes through so many incredible traumas to try and get there, and including, as I say, like the kind of the ultimate sacrifice in some ways as to what a man would do to ensure his survival. But in that moment, it's not even about his survival. It's literally about getting to his family to ensure their survival. And again, that's just so beautifully crafted, and involves one of the most violent and again, I'd say truthful, because it's a violent scene where he's fighting for his life and the life of his family. But it's, again, as is our movie, it's messy and real and just pure passion and emotion and terror. And it's ugly. And it's very, very destructive. But at the same time, that is part of the sacrifice which brings his redemption. Believe it or not, I actually knew quite a lot about comets and asteroids. I'm a big fan of the sky, of planets, of stars, of universe, of galaxies, of comets, asteroids. So I knew a bit about it, and actually could point Rick towards a couple of documentaries that I'd seen of actual impacts and what that would and what that would entail, what that would be like to people like us, you know, so, yes, I did. And we did some extra research, whether it was about the comet itself, but also about what are the roles of first responders in times like this? What are the parts of society that would break down? Who reacts how? Who decides to take the higher road? Who's out there trying to help other people? And who's out there just trying to, help themselves? But so yes, we did some research, but to be honest, that was more in my role as producer in developing the script with Rick. But in terms of John Garrity, my character, no, he doesn't know jack shit about comets, and doesn't really care until it becomes important. And again, I liked that as well. I always use the word messiness, but it's messiness or kind of organic or groundedness, but just the fact that as the comet's hitting, sometimes you're affected by it, sometimes you're not. Parts of it are relevant to you, parts of it involve waiting around, parts of it involve cues, lines, panic, boredom. There's a lot of things as this builds, but there's always this inevitability that it's coming and there's no stopping it. Again, I feel like as I talk, it's not even the question you asked, but as I talk, I keep thinking how uncanny it is. None of us knew this, although it seems like every movie I make ends up being about a subject that happens after we shoot it, but it couldn't be more relevant to where we're at now, this inevitability and this thing that just builds and builds and builds. And you can make a bit of a difference, but really it's a foe either way too big for us to come to terms with or way too small for us to come to terms with. But it's that they're both examples of things that would have us on our knees. There was pretty much no green screen, no nothing. It just involved me looking down the road, imagining seeing almost like a ripple effect coming up, and then falling back onto the ground. No, there was everything else was just put in digitally. So the movie is called Greenland because that's where they're trying to get to. And Greenland is, well, the US government have built quite a few nuclear bunkers there 40, 50 years ago that have been in disuse. But unbeknownst to us, that the information about this comet hitting Earth was available to them, of course, way before it was available to us. And they had already been planning how the logistics of how to get as much of the population over there, and then also who in that population is applicable, who qualifies to get over there, and they're basically being flown over there at incredibly short notice in military planes. But I also think Greenland just symbolically There's such a freshness and hope. It feels like the last bastion of nature, of mankind, of hopes, of something so beautiful and raw and untouched. The locations in this movie, again, they were all, we were where we were, which very much helped. We were on freeways, we were in Air Force bases, we were, in the housing estates with the families. There was no studio work here. We were always on location, and that worked. I felt really well, again, in being in the truth of every moment. It is easy when you're in a car jam with hundreds of people and you're all kind of running to get to a place. And that was definitely that Air Force base. One, the crowds that we had, and we're sitting around like 5 or 6 C-130 cargo planes, which are insanely big. So you have the scope and the epicness that we were looking for in this movie, with thousands of extras. And of course, the military gave us all their personnel as well. They were incredibly helpful. And that's another thing that reminded me of, again, where we're at today is, and it's something I feel like our movie touches on and makes a point of on a couple of occasions, is first responders, those who are just there doing their job, the unsung heroes, who, there's a beautiful scene in this movie where my wife is furious at this colonel for not getting the help that she needs to get her kid through. And the woman says, no, none of my family are going. 99% of the military have not been chosen to go to Greenland, but they're still there. They're volunteering, and that's the world. Well, Morena's amazing. I was very excited to get her on board on this movie. And the first couple of days I thought, oh, she's going to be tough. She's coming in. She knows what she wants. She's very serious. And you know what? It became maybe my favorite bonding experience on a movie. We became exceptionally close, and it really helped because we had to be. We spent a lot of time together, and she's a phenomenal actress who had to go through, like, reading it, going, what have I got to go through? But then I would read her stuff and go, it's like, that is some intense shit that she has to deal with. Having your kid taken right in front of you that you think you're never going to see again, when you're already living in a world of just complete hell. And just, I felt our chemistry together is great. It works so great in the movie, but I just also love the chemistry of us working together and performing. There was a real truth to it. It was very easy. We just fit together well, and fit together in all the good ways and the bad ways, and the issues that we had, and in the love that really comes through in our relationship as the movie progresses, as the story progresses, which, again, by the way, is the other thing is, I find, is when you strip it all away in times like this, in life or death situations, what is important? And that is your family. Again, we're seeing that today, that everything else, all the artifice is stripped away, and you go, what are we really here for? And you're here, for your family, for your loved ones. And I think that's a very important message in the movie, is everything else, none of it really matters. Your job, your money, the size of your house. It's being around the ones that you love. And I feel like this movie really gives that message very, very powerfully. And that's why you can go on this ride, and by the end, you're incredibly drained. And like, I've seen it now with a lot of people, and I love it because people love this movie, and it does take a big chunk out of them, and they're left. Roger was great. Roger's going to be a big star. He's an incredibly sweet kid. He is such a sweet disposition, and he's an incredibly talented actor, and he really brings so much heart and soul to this movie. And I loved my stuff with him, and I really loved the stuff between Morena and Roger. I think that works so beautifully. The hell that they have to go through together, and this mother just trying to protect her son through all these challenges. I feel like it works well in this movie because, listen, we've all been now. We live in a world, sadly, where I feel like most of us have been in situations where something pretty dangerous has happened around us, and suddenly, and you have family all trying to get through, and they're trying to get through. They're in Scotland or England or somewhere else going, are you okay? Are you, like, even just now with the looting and the rioting, it's kind of crazy. So I feel like often cell phones are used excessively in movies, and it can take away from the drama, and I find it annoying. But in this movie, because it is so essential for us trying to stay together, and of course, and I have that line where you go, you would think technology would work in a crisis, but of course it doesn't, and it doesn't, and it means that we're so close together and yet so far apart. We could be anywhere. They could just as easily be on the moon, and that leads to really, I think, a lot of great tension and anxiety, and but also some humor. Just at the times that messages come through, it's always like, really? And now I'm seeing this now. It's come through now. But yeah, no, I feel like that part, the cell phones technology, all worked really, really well in the movie. Well, I feel like once you make a movie with Rick, I don't really know where else to go. It's like it's nobody else is Rick. I weirdly, the first movie I produced was Law Abiding Citizen, and I interviewed Rick for that movie, and in the end we went with somebody else, but he was always my favorite. So, and that was 12 years ago, and we always said we were going to work together, and then. So taking on Angel Has Fallen, and the way that he helped us rediscover that franchise. I've never known anybody who works as hard as Rick, who is passionate and excited, and who knows more about the process of making a movie. That is every single department. He seems to know each of their jobs better than they do. And I don't mean that in a, you should know what you're doing. He just is well up on that information and experience, and he doesn't stop, and he pushes me to my limit, and we have our moments. We both have very strong opinions, but it's always comes from a respectful, loving place, and I know that he has my back like nobody else does. And I know that before Angel Has Fallen, I went to see his movie Shot Caller, with the idea of maybe taking Angel Has Fallen to him. And at first I was like, okay, I don't know if he's going to be right for this. In the first few minutes I thought, because Rick has a way of shooting the opening of his movies very plainly, and then it sneaks up and it grabs you, and the plainness is just the truth of every moment. And you kind of think you're in one movie, and then always it comes up and it grabs you by the balls and takes you into a very different movie. And that opening 5-10 minutes of just sitting with characters is all the more powerful and desired in order to take you on that journey.
When I first got the script, I was expecting your traditional action movie with your traditional guy being the total hero of the whole thing, and I'm just sort of along for the ride. When I read Greenland, I really liked that there was a heart to the story, that it was a couple with problems, that it was real, that Allison was just as much a part of being involved in creating the safety for her child, and emotionally invested in this relationship and in what was happening. And I felt like it was such a strong family nucleus, even though they were having their issues, that I really was compelled to tell the story. When the movie starts, Allison is pretty pissed at John. I think she's trying, for the sake of their child more than anything else, to hold it together and to give him another chance. I don't think she's there yet. I don't think she's ready. I think she's still angry and resentful. We created this story that he cheated on her, but it's two people in a marriage, and he just wasn't dealing with whatever the issue was that they were having, and obviously did something terrible, but she also was not connected to him, and the way we kind of made it up for ourselves was, she was very unavailable and emotionally kind of detached, and it created a big rift between them. And it was really great to, start a movie in a place where you're not sure that things are going to work out. And it gives you somewhere to go in the end. And I thought that was really exciting. In the first scene of the movie, Allison is running very fast on a treadmill that goes nowhere. So that should give you some clues. I think she's very, very driven and very ambitious. She wanted to create the perfect family, and I think that's something that I relate to very much as a woman, is you want to be the perfect mom and the perfect wife and the perfect everything, and it's impossible. And I think she painted herself in a corner in that way, but I think she's just working out her demons, and I think she's somebody who goes hard. She really fights for what she believes, fights for her family, fights for her kid. She's incredibly strong and willful and confident, but she's a little bit broken when you see her in the beginning because she's been through so much. But she's really trying to kind of, patch over those cracks and not let them show, and pretend that everything is going to be okay, even though that's not what she's feeling right now. Yeah, she's perfectly suited for an end-of-the-world disaster. Yeah, Allison, I think getting your kid taken away from you is probably the worst thing that could happen to a mom. And that's exactly what happens in the movie. And she, though perfectly equipped to deal with stress and, somebody who does not flee at the sight of danger, that is a complete and utter vulnerability that hits her really hard. And I'm yet to shoot that scene. I'm really, really, really not looking forward to it, because it's a place emotionally that I'm going to have to get to that I really don't want to get to. But speaking about Allison, I think she's, thank goodness she is who she is, and she's a fighter, and she just is going to do whatever it takes to get her kid back. She's going to run down that highway. She's going to find where they are. She's going to figure it out. And she's not going to give up until she does. And I think that journey, that falling that she's had to do emotionally, helps also her reconnect with John in the end. It's very easy to blame other people for everything that's going on. And I think in that moment, she realizes how fragile everything is, and that you just have to kind of own up to your own stuff. I think we got lucky. I think the Garritys got incredibly lucky. I mean, obviously, John is an engineer and has that ability to offer, but I think it's more about, some people didn't, and we see all of our neighbors not getting chosen, and it's a incredibly harrowing scene that we had to shoot, where you're leaving people behind and you want to take everybody with you, but you realize it's not going to work and there's nothing you can do. And I think Allison feels very guilty about that, and it's a tough part of the movie to even understand, like, why us? But I think that's a question that is throughout the movie in many different ways. Why us? Why is this happening? Why is the world ending? Why are we in this point that we are now? And how do we build ourselves back together? Yeah, I think the themes of the movie are very, very powerful. I mean, the obvious ones like humanity and family, there are so many great people in this movie that help each other out, just as there are many terrible people who are taking advantage of a vulnerable situation. But I think ultimately the movie is positive, and the rebirth of, the human race is going to happen, and we are going to survive in the face of this incredible peril. And, it does make you think about your life a lot, and make you think about what would happen if this actually happened to us. And it doesn't seem that far off. I mean, it doesn't seem that crazy. That's what's so scary about it. And it's also what drew me to the movie. It's an action movie. It's fun to watch. It's harrowing. It's terrifying, but it's very real. It is something that is very palpable and plausible. I think she's running on adrenaline, but I do think it's also who she is. It's a combination of both. It's survival mode 100%. What else is she going to do, sit in a corner and cry? But I think that it takes somebody not being a victim and not being a martyr, and just, focusing on the task at hand. And that's something that her and John have in common. And when they, start on this journey together, you can see that they're very much not together, and they're fighting about it and bickering and arguing, and then it kind of like dawns on them, you know, as all these tragedies start to happen, it becomes very real that what's more important is the unity of the family.
Yeah.
I keep joking that if it hadn't been for this comet, who knows if they would survive, this marriage would survive. So in a way, it's a good thing. But I think that, you know, I think that she starts to see John step up as a man, step up as the member, as the man of the family, and that's what she's been needing him to do. I think he also shows a vulnerability that he had trouble with before, and she sees that, and all of these things kind of layer towards the forgiveness. She sees him; he's apologetic about it, and he knows that he messed up. But he also, you know, he's taking ownership of his flaws and wanting her to do the same. And it takes two people to kind of meet there in the middle. And I think, isn't there a Camila Cabello song about this? Meet me in the middle. But that's exactly what a marriage is, and that's what you need in order to move forward. And I think it happens in a couple of pivotal moments in the movie. And being with my father, with Dale, helps solidify that as well, because she kind of sticks up for her husband in a moment where you wouldn't expect her to, and I think it makes her realize that there's still love there. I didn't really expect, it kind of caught me off guard, the relationship with my father actually in this movie, because I thought, you know, he's kind of a hard man. He's definitely somebody who's stubborn and willful, and he's got his guns and his farm, and, you know, a little bit emotionally disconnected, I guess, but you could tell he loves his girl, you know, and that she's very much daddy's girl. And that was really nice to have that anchor in the movie. When she loses her kid and finds him again and reconnects with her husband, and all of that happens at the farm or close to the farm, to home, to what was home. And I think that's very, very powerful. And seeing her father in that moment, I think, is what makes her be able to let her guard down. And you don't see her doing that much in the movie, where she just kind of loses it and is able to feel that intense vulnerability and pain. Otherwise, I think she would fall apart if it hadn't been in that moment. Dale's a great character. You know, I've had this. I don't know if this is what Scott Glenn was thinking about when he was playing the part, but I always assumed that my mom was kind of like the lighter presence in the family, and that he was much more obviously the patriarch, but like a little harsher, a little more brusque and rough. Yeah, but then she passes away, and I think that softens him up a bit. And I think that, you know, his girl also softens him up, his daughter. But I love that he's just sitting there playing poker at the face of the end of the world, because I think he believes there's nothing he can do. He doesn't care. He's lived his life. He's gonna go down with his gun in his hand, in his comfort zone, where he feels like he's the king of the domain, and he's not going to be running away from some major disaster. You know, a lot of the stuff that I have to do is much more emotional and heart-driven. And, you know, he's great at, like, sussing that out. Rick can see, you know, when we get to a scene that is very emotionally important, that drives the story forward and the connection to the audience. He's the first to say, okay, this scene, we really need to hit these moments. This is what it's about, and we'll talk it through. And as you've seen on set, there's not much rehearsing going on. And I kind of love that, because the mistakes are in the movie, and it's very human, and it's very frantic, and it's very, like, you know, just what it feels like, what it would feel like if you're actually doing these scenes in the face of a disaster. So, you know, as far as the stunts go, I think he's wonderful at that aspect of it. But he's also great at just knowing the beats that need to be hit emotionally. I do appreciate the process. There have been times where I've been frustrated because I literally don't know where I should be standing, how to find the lens, where's the camera, how many cameras are on me, what size are we doing, there's so much of that I have no clue. You know, there are times where I do need to know that stuff, because it'll be more efficient if I'm able to be on camera as opposed to searching for it. But I quite like that there isn't a hard mark, that we have the flexibility to, we're working with a kid, to check on him, to look down, to be down, then up, then look around, then, something falls, you use it in the scene, you grab it again. It's very, very real, very human, and I really love that as well. That's a tough part for a young actor to play. It's really emotionally driven, and most of the time I feel really terrible that we're having to torture this poor kid into feeling all these horrible things and crying all the time. And but yeah, Nathan symbolizes so much for this couple. The hope, where they've been, how far they've come, and it is the ultimate driving force between getting these people to safety. I mean, if you just have two adults they're just, in a way, I think it would appear selfish. But because there's a kid involved and the future is really his, it symbolizes so much more in the film. And it's become this sort of a part of me. I always have my hand on him. I'm always looking to see what we're doing. Is he's safe? What's happening? It gives you this sort of ultimate purpose in the movie that's really powerful. My thoughts about Jerry. I really didn't know what to expect. I've only seen him acting. We didn't know each other before this movie, and he's obviously an incredible professional and does what he does really, really well. And I love watching him just running or doing the most mundane stunts and things. He makes everything seem so like a real person doing them. The other person that I love is Harrison Ford doing that stuff. And that's a skill, because I look terrible doing stuff like that. But I've learned a lot watching him, the physicality and how he really gets into the moments and the roles. And he's just been so much fun. I mean, we have a lot of time to kill sitting in cars. All of our scenes are either running or sitting in a car driving. So in between setups, we often sit and just kind of pour our souls out to each other. I know a lot about him, and he knows a lot about me, because there's a lot of downtime. But whatever footage was, whenever the cameras were running or whatever was we should have been on the behind the scenes in the car, because I've taken some videos. It's been really fun. We have a good time just chatting. He's become a real pal. Ultimately, I want them to walk out of the theater and have had a great time watching a movie, because what we do for a living ultimately should be fun. I think also, though, there is a greater message, which is, we can do anything together. And it's a really nice family moment, and positive, and, gives hope, I think, for a community and that kind of togetherness. And I think that's really, really sweet. What would be my plan? This movie has made me realize I'm very ill-prepared for a disaster. What would be my plan? Obviously, safety. Where is safe? Getting to safety, getting my family together, just doing whatever it took. And then if I couldn't reach it, it would just be to try to spend the last few moments together as much as possible. That sounds terrible. I just made myself really upset.
You have no, I know.